This week's show brought to you by Steph Curry's Missed Threes. Come on, it was almost in. Welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks Show. The finals are in full swing, and that is going to be the crux of this week's show. I am your host, Andres Alvarez, aka Nerd Numbers. Patrick Minton is unfortunately stuck in traffic. Don't worry, though. He did put some kind words in an email that I will be reading on tonight's show. And of course, with me, as always, is our fabulous, wonderful, holy, you hate that those phrases, Brian, but Brian Foster, aka Boxscore Brian on Twitter. Brian, give a shout out.
Yeah, no, nothing wrong with being holy. And, maybe someday, Dre, someday I can get there.
I don't know if this matters at all, but I am loving Twitch just as a medium, one of the things I love. So for those of you, we'll say it at the end, but we've gone to twitch.tv to stream, twitch.tv/nerd numbers. I love it so much more than YouTube for live streaming because we don't have to get a new link every week. But twitchstreams.org retweeted me tweeting out that it was going live, Brian. So there you go. All right. So, Brian, bad news for you. It seems to just be the case that around the weekends, if you want to watch a Warriors game near time that you should be working on the Boxscore Geeks Show, a topic I'm going to touch on a little at the end of the show, things don't go that hot. I'm going to do an audible. I'm going to throw it to you. Brian, how are you feeling about the series so far?
Oh, I feel fine. Losing one game isn't changing anything. I'm still overly confident. This big pile of data saying the Warriors are one of the best teams of all time, it doesn't go away because of that one loss, so I think they'll be fine.
But what I will say, and I've said this before, is the playoffs is one of those places where regression to the mean, by the time it kicks in, the series can be over. And we've seen that happen before. When I actually wrote an article this last week, of course, I think I have a superpower, Brian. I think if I come out with the stats really staunchly in favor of a position, in a position of saying that Russell Westbrook is never going to be that great, or that it's silly to think that a team should keep Klay Thompson instead of Kevin Love, or that the Cavaliers are just going to get blown out this finals. I think when I come out and say these things, the universe conspires against me to say, come on, you've read the Black Swan. Stop being so overconfident just because of a wide margin.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I guess, next time you want to write about how it's impossible to win the lottery, let me know. I'll buy a few tickets.
Awesome. And what I'll say is actually funny. I had a friend of mine that I was able to get, not big money. I got a $50 bet at 2-to-1 odds about the Warriors taking. I felt so good. And then the first game happens, and I got a little nervous. For those of you listening to the show that didn't watch, the first game went to overtime. It was really, really freaky. But luckily, they prevailed, but I want to talk about that in a second. Luckily is a bad word to use. I apologize for that, and I'll explain more why in a second. And then, Kyrie Irving's out. That's why I feel bad about saying luckily. But Kyrie Irving gets injured in overtime. All right, it's over, right? My same friend, I'm like, well, good try. It actually looked like it might have been competitive, but it's over. And then game 2 goes to overtime, and the Cavaliers win. So clearly, this idea of this series just being a blowout was kind of misplaced on my part.
Well, I mean, potentially. Some people are saying Steph Curry might have had the worst game of his career yesterday. So, is that going to happen again? Maybe. Well, I don't know. Are we right into the series now? Are we analyzing these games? Are we getting into the numbers yet, Dre?
Oh, yeah, let's do that. So actually, this is something, and bear with us, dear listener, we're trying something here. This is something we actually hope to do. Brian has talked about this before, something he's been excited about. And when we actually get more time, it might actually happen. But I actually like digging into the box score because I think something that's not as intuitive to as many people. I know myself, Patrick, you, Brian, after a game is over, I'll hop onto Popcorn Machine. I'll hop on just the standard box score. I'll look at the shot chart. I'll look at all of this stuff to try and interpret a game, and it's not necessarily the most intuitive. So why don't you bring up the box score? Just, Basketball Reference is fine. I may have to find a better computer to do this on because I'm using my Surface Pro, and for whatever reason, I think it's Flash. It runs a little slow for me. But your comment was yesterday the worst game of Steph Curry's career?
Oh, yeah, we've got game 1 box score up now. Let me get game 2 instead.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, he shot 5 for 23. Not so strong. Not so strong. He's killing 2 for 15 on threes. And, yeah, so just in terms of the analysis, there's kind of, a few different things going on here. Coach Nick has said all over Twitter, and actually I don't think he has released his video breaking down the game yet, but he pretty much said, give all the credit to Dellavedova, that he went crazy on defense, he totally shut down Curry, and that the Cavs should get all kinds of credit for this. And then the other side, the aforementioned Patrick Minton mentioned over email that this looks like variance to me, and we'll bring out the shot charts later, but I feel like those are kind of the two camps of opinions I've heard so far on Curry's poor performance.
So let's go for two things. So sorry to throw a bunch of stuff at you. So Brian, is it possible for you to get the stats.nba.com for Game 2, the play tracking up, and scroll down to the Warriors?
Yeah, I'll start looking for that, and yeah, you can start on your
talking.
thoughts.
So again, this is, by the way, I don't think as many people realize this there. Stats.nba.com, great resource. If you don't know, there is a technology called SportsView. These are little cameras they put across the top of every NBA arena. It used to be the case that certain teams would just pay for themselves. It was their own. Luckily, a few years ago, the NBA just, ponied up and put it in every single stadium. The sad part for us, though, is that means that essentially 2015, this year, is the first year of clean data we have for this. So there's a few other years where there's some data, but it's not clean, it's not complete, and it's just as frustrating as the fact that play-by-play and shot charts didn't really come into vogue in the NBA until about 2001. So that means some great games like Michael Jordan shooting in the 80s we're just not going to see. And additionally, the full box score wasn't in existence until 1978. So, there are players like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or Wilt Chamberlain in the past that probably put up, absurd stat lines with things like blocks, assists that we're just never going to get to see. Okay, so anyway, the player tracking one shows some interesting stuff. Some of it I find is, meaningless. They show that in that game, Steph Curry ran 2.99 miles and on average went 4.23 miles an hour, I guess, which is kind of cool, but fine. But the key one to what you were saying, Brian, and there might be something to it, is Steph Curry took 23 shots, as you mentioned. Of those 23 shots, 16 were contested, according to SportsView. And of those 16, he was only able to complete 3. So clearly, if the argument Coach Nick is putting up is Dellavedova's defense, contested shots were holding down Steph Curry, there might be something to it. Now, to Patrick's point about variance, Steph Curry also only went 2 for 7 on his uncontested attempts. And as we know, Steph Curry is one of the best shooters in the league. So, this game went to overtime, which means it was close. And it doesn't take, a genius to know if Steph Curry even just shot closer to 50% on his uncontested shots, this game doesn't go to overtime. So it's kind of hard to say.
Yeah, and that's kind of my thoughts too, and why I'm still way more overconfident than I should be about this series as a fan anyway, is that, when the Warriors are playing this poorly and the Cavs are still kind of barely winning, it just seems like a bad sign for the Cavs. I mean, because that's one thing that's not being talked about is, yes, LeBron's being extremely heroic, doing the best he can here, but is this like the best case scenario for the Cavs offense? Like, how are they going to find a way to score more points?
Well, I mean, LeBron James, one thing, his shooting hasn't been that great, and I don't know. Yeah, let's go into this. So, apologies, listeners, we're jumping all over the place.
Yeah.
If we were a better produced show, we'd have graphics queued, and this would have been set. But okay, I wrote, or I didn't write, I did some research for Coach Nick over at B-Ball Breakdown. He did a fantastically tantalizing piece called How the Cavs Are Winning in Spite of LeBron James, or something like that, which is fantastic. That's a great title. And what I basically looked at was LeBron James's shooting. And so I came up with 2 charts that I made for Coach Nick. The first was basically the what I'd call the Morey ball chart. So LeBron James, as we've mentioned, is the first player in modern NBA history to make it to 5 consecutive NBA Finals. Obviously, the first player to make it to 5 consecutive NBA Finals on 2 different teams. And when we look at his shooting, though, what we notice from what we call Morey ball is layups and threes. LeBron James is taking the most shots that he has in the last 5 years at the rim, and he's taking the most threes that he has in the last 5 years. And yet they're just not sinking, right? His threes aren't going in. His shots at the rim aren't going in. And that's troubling for many, many reasons. Now, I can't explain the threes as well. It's possible age, fatigue. I know we've talked to Art Rondeau, who does a lot of research on free throw shooting. And as we know, this last year, LeBron James changed his body type tremendously. And Art Rondeau's actually talked about how things like fatigue and changes in body mass can do tremendous things to your shooting style. So it's possible that's what's mucked up his three-point shooting this year. But at the rim was really disconcerting to me. And I apologize, Brian, I didn't send you stats for this. But when it comes to LeBron James shooting at the rim, his efficiency has gone way down. But something I noticed when I was looking over LeBron James's just stats in general for this year's playoffs versus last is he's basically started taking way more shots this year. Completely to be expected, right? With Kevin Love out, with Kyrie Irving injured part of the playoffs, LeBron James's usage has gone up, not a surprise. But even though he's basically shooting 50% more shots than he has in the past, his free throw rate per game remains exactly consistent with what it was last year. And my hypothesis, and sorry to jump ahead, Brian, but do you have that Vine that Patrick sent along?
Oh, let's bring it up. Yeah.
My hypothesis is that LeBron James isn't getting as many foul calls as he has in the past. And Patrick sent along this Vine of, I think, how many times do you count there, Brian? 10, 11? I think LeBron has fouled 11 times in his trip to the rim there. Doesn't get called, takes the shot. The Cavaliers actually get the rebound, but it doesn't go in. The Warriors come up with the ball. And you kind of just go, well, we've talked about WWE before. This seems like wrestling, right? This seems just like lots of hits and no calls. Where were the refs? So I kind of have a hypothesis this year that one of the things that's impacting LeBron is if he were getting more foul calls, not only would his points per game be up, his shooting efficiency at the rim would be up as well. It would be back to previous levels. And I don't really know what to do about that. It's just something interesting to note is that I think there is something to what I said last year, that LeBron James has played a ton of minutes in the NBA and that LeBron James, has put the most minutes of professional basketball at an elite level on his body of any player in the history of professional basketball by age 30. That no one else can come close. It's physically impossible. And that could affect him. But I think also, maybe the refs are just sick of LeBron James. Maybe people hate Cleveland. Maybe they want, maybe the refs are instructed to keep, I'm getting into conspiracy theory territory, apologies. Maybe the refs were instructed to keep the Eastern Conference close because, even with the Cavs beat up, the East was just terrible. But whatever it is, LeBron James, I don't think is getting to the line as much as you would expect, both for how physical his game is and additionally, for how respected of a star he should be at this point.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I don't remember if it was you or Patrick or someone else said last week that his kind of minute profile was similar to Larry Bird's. And that comparison was actually made on the broadcast of last night's game. So a lot of people are starting to pick up on that, it looks like. LeBron's playing a ton of minutes.
Well, I did, and by the way, I need to check this real quick. But so here's what I did. When I did a look, I basically said how many players in the history of the NBA have played 700 minutes in 5 consecutive playoffs, because I figured that was going to be the cutoff for LeBron James's period of time for his 5 finals he's went to. So that was my initial query. And when I did that, what I basically came up with was essentially it's only been LeBron James and 3 Boston Celtics in the 80s. Dennis Johnson, Larry Bird, and Kevin McHale on those Boston Celtics teams. And so, you kind of just go, holy cow, this is ridiculous. And now people are slightly better querying than me asked, and this has come up popular in a lot of stats recently, is Larry Bird is the only player over a 5-year period that has played more minutes than LeBron James. And LeBron James, it's just if he plays 34 minutes in the next game, he's going to pass 700 easily. And, he's still got at least 3 games to go. So it kind of goes without saying that LeBron James is going to get another absurdly long playoffs this year. So Larry Bird's the name that came up because he's the only player that had played more minutes in a 5-year stretch, and LeBron James is going to pass that mark. So some of it, could just be fatigue. Like he has not gotten a break. Don't forget some of those years he was playing for, Olympic basketball. So it wasn't even like LeBron James stops playing after going for a title and then hops on, right? He, goes and plays Olympic basketball. So I don't know on that, but I am surprised by the lack of calls. You're a Warriors fan, and you've watched both of the games. Do you feel LeBron James is getting the respect a star like him deserves?
Yeah, it's tough to say something like that because, well, so here's the thing. For one, this is the finals. I'm watching the game and in bars with my buddies. So what I'm trying to say by that is I have a fan's perspective, not really an analytic perspective on the series as of right now. Maybe as the days pass, it'll get closer. But, I mean, it's clear that it's been physical and a lot of stuff is not getting called on both sides, especially against Cleveland in the last game.
Yeah, that was okay. And another, I'm in love with these kind of arbitrary stats. I've called them Brian Burke stats before. Where basically they're cool stats, but they're not really all that meaningful.
Who just went over to ESPN, I believe. Did you see that news, Trey, a couple days ago?
Fantastic!
Yeah, he sold all of his metrics to ESPN. He's now going to be working there. So yeah, congrats, Brian Burke.
This is going to sound mean, but I'm not.
I knew you'd have this opinion.
Okay, so allow me to explain. If you recall, a few years back, Dean Oliver was hired by ESPN. And if you're looking for what Dean Oliver was hired for, he was specifically hired to make football metrics for them. That was like the first project they put him on. And additionally, he actually worked with Brian Burke to make some of their I don't even know what it's called. I don't care. Sorry. The QBR or whatever, right? So he was actually put in charge of making football ratings for them. And, as far as I could tell, they didn't do anything with him. They had Dean Oliver on staff, and it just didn't seem like he did that much. And so then, right, you get Brian Burke, and to me, it's like the thing that makes me depressed about ESPN is it really does just kind of seem to me that they can get talent, right? They're one of the few places that can actually pay. And I'm just never... It sounds mean. I'm just never that impressed with what they do with that talent. Like, that's, kind of mean to say. And so it actually kind of, at this point, I get sad. I used to get excited when they would find good talent. I would go, fantastic, right? I would go, great. They got Dean Oliver on staff. Finally, ESPN is going to turn around. They got Nate. I still get Nate Silver a little credit, right? Okay. They got Nate Silver on staff, so they're going to do something, right? And, what ends up happening, right? Nate Silver, I haven't been that impressed with what's come out of them. Brian Burke goes in, or Dean Oliver goes in. I wasn't that impressed with what they do with Dean Oliver. So it kind of just comes down to the fact that I get worried about ESPN acquiring people I like because it's almost like Fox Television, right? Fox Television had Firefly, one of the best shows, and, they ended up basically just tanking it. So... when it comes down to it, I feel ESPN can be the same way. Maybe I'm just old Ryan and crotchety, and I'm never happy. I guess that's what I meant.
Well, here's the silver lining. Maybe if this doesn't turn out as well for us fans of his writing as it possibly could, at least it'll turn out for him. We have to assume he's getting paid at least.
That does make me happy. We're teasing this a lot, but I'm going to talk a little bit about content providing on the net and all that at the end of the show. And that is one thing. It makes me sad to see the number of good analysts out on the net that are making content and essentially not getting paid for it, and in some cases basically just getting exploited for it, where I know teams are using it or big content providers are asking them for their work and using it and making money off them, and they're not. So it does, at least in the case of Dean Oliver and Brian Burke, at least I'm happy they got paid, right? At least that's a good thing. All right, Brian, by the way, I'm impressed I was able to, we'll see when I listen back, I'll see how subtle I was being. I looked up a stat while we were talking.
Oh, well done.
So the Warriors shot 22.9% from three last game in the finals. And, of course, lost in overtime. That is the first time this year. There have been 3 times this season they shot worse than that from 3. But all of them were last season. That is the first time this year this Warriors team has shot that bad from 3. And if we even just go to the next worst, 24.1% from 3, if they'd shot that last night, they would have won the game. So I think to your point and Patrick's point, being afraid of regression to the mean and such, I don't think it's tenable for the Cavaliers to expect the Warriors to shoot that bad from 3 2 games in a row.
Yeah, and so, to pick that back up again, I've got the shot charts here for this game. And
so this is game 2. I'll get them in front of me.
Yeah, and they're both pretty good shot charts, right? It's not There's a lot of shots at the rim.
Actually,
There's
if you
a
look
lot.
at it too, right, the Cavaliers are definitely more. So the Cavaliers have two interesting things going for them that I want to talk about to people with. One, they do have more mid-range shots. If you look on the left side, there are a lot more mid-range shots from out of the Cavaliers, right? And I heard it's a little painful for me as a Nuggets fan. Sorry, that was me chuckling to myself. It's a little painful for me as a Nuggets fan to see Mozgov and Andre Iguodala in the finals being hugely impactful for their respective teams for obvious reasons. But J.R. Smith is a funny one because he is so. This is classic J.R. J.R. Smith is a player that can shoot you into a game and shoot you out of it. And I saw so many get J.R. out of the games last game. He's a funny dude.
Yeah, but again, just on J.R. Smith is funny. I'm gonna not comment on that. I'll let that sit. I guess the only maybe I'll say this much. Maybe there's some hope in Denver with the D'Antoni rumors. He could get a real offense in there for the first time, making his return to Denver.
I'm not gonna have hope in Denver for a while.
That's fair.
All right. So anyway, so here's what we're talking about: the shot chart. The Cavaliers have more mid-range shots on the left side. Mid-range shots aren't your friend, and unsurprisingly, they basically have like 4 makes to like 10 misses. So they have more mid-range shots. This is something. Another interesting thing you should note is the Cavaliers have a ton of shots in the paint, and a lot of these are LeBron James. But what you should know, and this is something we've talked about before, is players are really, really good at the rim, but as soon as they get a little further away from the rim, their efficiency usually drops. And Patrick has hypothesized on this before, right? If you get to the rim, it means you either weren't contested or you're able to, beat your man. If you're shooting from in the paint but not at the rim, it probably means you couldn't get by your guy, so it's a contested shot. So that's actually a little troubling for the Cavaliers to see that many shots in the paint but not at the rim. Now the Warriors, right, they have a bunch of shots at the rim, exactly what you want, and a bunch of shots from three, but you notice basically on the left side, there's this big string of X's. I hope you've got the chart up and you're circling or whatever. Maybe when we get better, we can get like the Madden things and you can chalk it up and we can talk together. But
there we go.
On the left side, basically, there's this huge string of misses. And again, it's just not really tenable. Like Steph Curry, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson missed like a combined like 7 shots from a spot I'm sure both are very good at normally.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the point of looking at the shot charts, right? Is there something the Cavaliers are doing that's way better on offense than the Warriors? Nah, not really. I mean, and for people watching the game, they'd probably agree. It didn't look like, they were doing a significantly better job. Now, Steve Kerr and Stephen Curry both did complain a little about the Warriors' offense. They said, we were stagnant, we can pass it more, and we'll look at the tape. The stuff that players and coaches always say. So, yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm still so confident. I'm not seeing a lot here. And let's go back to Patrick's point again. He said almost right away, this just looks like variance to me. This doesn't look like the Cavs are really doing anything special. And the shot charts seem to back that up.
Yeah, I mean, again, like we already said, I'm looking at Steph Curry's shot chart, and it's just all red. For the season, his heat map, he is just all red. To expect him to shoot that poorly from 3 from that range. Yeah, I mean, I think Patrick's right? If you see a 23% from 3 shooting performance out of a team that shot, what was, do you know this off the top of their head, what was the Warriors' 3-point shooting efficiency this season?
Oh, team-wide? No, I don't have that, but I'll bring it up.
Oh, you don't know? Oh, that would have, I don't know if I think you're a Warriors fan. Basically right around 40%. So that, they basically shot half as good as they have all season from 3. To expect that to stay that way, as Patrick said, is not that likely. One thing I will give the Cavaliers last night that was remarkable, and this is what got me started on another trivia question. I'll throw this out. I'll answer it at the end of the show. So if you're listening, start thinking about this. If you follow me on Twitter, you already know the answer. But since 1985, which was when Basketball Reference has complete box score stats for the playoffs, there's only been one team in NBA Finals to have 4 players record 10 rebounds in a game since 1985. Can you think of the team and the players? But last night, the Cavaliers had 3 players that recorded 10-plus rebounds: LeBron James, Mozgov, and Tristan Thompson. So, it's actually quite remarkable. It's kind of an interesting perspective. on the Cavs going forward is they've got some really good big guys. I was really impressed with Mozgov's transformation. There's a lot of excitement going forward for that. I just don't know if it's going to be enough for the rest of the series.
Yeah, and that is probably the one area of hope for the Cavs. And again, we're just burying them after this great win they had. But sorry, Cavs and Cavs fans. No, but that's the one piece of...
By the way, I want this clear. I want to interrupt you there. This Cavs team has far exceeded my expectations.
Yeah.
And in fact, given like what we're seeing on the fouls and stuff, I don't know. Like LeBron, this wasn't supposed to even be possible. This could easily be a 2-0 series for the Cavaliers.
Yep.
And the fact that they're doing it without Kevin Love, without Kyrie Irving, and with LeBron James not getting any respect as the best player in NBA history, it's freaking remarkable. So no matter, I mean, even if they were to get swept the remaining 3 games, the simple fact of the matter is these first 2 games were way more than I expected out of this team. And by the way, let's give Patrick a shout out. He actually said, and I think he was a little off. He underestimated LeBron James. He actually called this a 5-game series. His logic being LeBron James, that's a good name. LeBron James was just going to have 1 game where he said, "F it, I'm going to take over this game," and he's had 2 so far. So
yeah, no, he has. But just to finish up the last point, we said this last week, and then on our earlier Warriors show early in the season, is that my personal fear for the Warriors is that they don't have enough size in the front court, right? That they have plenty of size in the backcourt, and their small forwards are pretty big. But other than Bogut, he's like the only dependable, 7-footer that they have, really. Now, guys like Green are able to play much bigger than their 6'6" stature it could indicate, and their numbers have been showing it. But then the concern is, of course, well, to keep that up, right? In this game, they didn't. Like you said, the 3 big men for the Cavaliers, including LeBron James, they all went crazy on the boards. There were people saying Bogut's defense was terrible in this game. Again, I'm not going to comment on how quality individual defense is when there's no numbers to back it up. But yeah, so apparently Bogut got run off the floor and played poor defense. So yeah, that's looking like a weakness for the Warriors. They just can't contain the big men.
Well, let's also be careful. I mean, the Cavaliers' effective field goal percentage in both of these games
very low.
Has been below 500. So it's like this is one of those rough things. Like I like both football and hockey, and sometimes it'll seem weird to me, right, when a team loses a game, and they lose the game like 10-7 or 10-3. You can't blame the defense for that loss, right?
Yeah.
If the offense wasn't able to put up 2 touchdowns and the defense only let 10 by, it's really hard. And I've seen goalies the same way in starting pitchers in baseball, where it's like, okay, the pitcher goes 7 innings and strikes out 10 guys and only lets go 1 run and he loses the game. It's like, well, clearly his offense couldn't even get 1 run in that period of time. So when the Cavaliers, this was something we talked about, when we were talking at the Eastern Conference, where we were basically saying these teams are horrible. None of them can shoot. They all are horrible at shooting. Well, so let's get. I've got these in front of me. Game 1, Cleveland's effective field goal percentage 46.3%. Game 2, 37.6%. If you are going to complain about Bogut's defense when this other team shoots significantly below league average, but when we look right, the Warriors shot 500, which is okay. They won the first game. 500 from effective field goal percentage, which factors in threes. In game 2, they only shot 44.6%. How are you blaming that on Bogut? How are you blaming that? How are you blaming that on defense when the Cleveland Cavaliers' offensive rating was just nothing special in both games? Actually, their offensive rating in the first game was good, but that was because of other things, offensive rebounds particularly.
Yeah, and of course, personally, I agree. If you look at Bogut's box score stats that you actually can record, he had 10 rebounds and 2 blocks, so it looks like a decent big man performance to me. Not a lot of minutes, though, only 25, for a star big man in the playoffs. Maybe he could use more, but, I mean, again, even though I'm presenting these other opinions, I pretty much agree. It's almost like, well, yeah, the Cavs have this one thing going for them, but, again, to channel Patrick and use the poker analogy, they're going to need the, running cards to hit their flush, They need all these things to happen.
What's
fascinating
to me, because I looked at this at the end of the season, was Kevin Love did not live up to the hype we were hoping, but it would be disingenuous to say he did not have a good season. He was very close to star level. And the reason I would argue he wasn't star level was just a very simple reason. The ball wasn't in his hands. And, for a player, when, if you look at Kevin Love's strengths, you hired Kevin Love for his offense. Let's just not lie. Even if you don't, I don't personally think he's a bad defender. That's just my take. All the numbers I've seen, his rebounds, et cetera, stuff. Patrick has made the point in the past, right? You can say he's not a great on-ball defender or post defender, fine, but he's not a bad defender. It's not his forte. He's no Kevin Garnett, but he's amazing on offense. And the Cavaliers got him and didn't put the ball in his hand. And this, like I said, it would be kind of like if you hired Miguel Cabrera in baseball and just, always pinch hit for him in the fourth inning. Or not the fourth, maybe sixth inning, right? If you took away one at bat from Miguel Cabrera every game and then like, why isn't he getting as many home runs? It's like, well, come on, do the math. You took away one at bat. So, but Kevin Love was still really, really good. And if this team, we've had lots of complaints about Blatt as a coach, but if next season they can be a little better, not even great, just a little better with the offense. And, if Kyrie Irving is rehabbing and maybe not taking as many minutes and not putting as much pressure on himself, it's possible. Okay, you've got Mozgov, who's playing better than I thought. And, he was a young, tall guy, had lots of skill. This was kind of a mellow thing. Mozgov looked like he had all the skills in the world to be great. He just never seemed to put it together. Seems to have now in Cleveland. Tristan Thompson, we've always been all over, and he's been great. LeBron James, he's LeBron James. If Kevin Love can come back, by the way, I'm starting to feel this feels like Derrick Rose too. I'm like, Kevin Love can come back healthy, so keep that in mind. And, if Kyrie Irving can even just defer a little and they can get one or two better, just to upgrade their bench a little, this Cavs team actually looks pretty scary going forward. And it would actually be fast. I would love it if the Warriors-Cavs turned into a rivalry. I actually kind of miss rivalries in the NBA, and there have been a few. The Thunder have been an example, right, where it's amazing to me that the Spurs Heat turned into a rivalry before the Thunder Spurs, the Thunder Heat. It was so sad to me to not see the Thunder really stick around as a powerhouse to be, a rival with someone.
Yeah, I agree, and, just kind of thinking about how the offseason's going to go. Yeah, I mean, it could be totally crazy. The Thunder could blow things up. Maybe Durant, and Westbrook don't like each other. Who knows? And maybe injuries could be different next year. This season, the Thunder were destroyed by them, and the Warriors were totally healthy. Well, not totally healthy, but for the most part, they did better than these other teams in injury luck. So injury luck could get flipped around next season. Front offices and other teams could get impatient. There was rumors that, before Game 6 where the Clippers looked like they were going to beat the Rockets, everyone's saying, let's blow up the Rockets. And, of course, it went totally different. So these are just rumors, but, yeah, the West is so difficult, it's going to be tough to see who emerges next season.
And in the East, I mean, I would love it if Durant would go to the Wizards. I'm hugely behind the Durant to Wizard rumors for a few reasons. It's a big market, right? That's a good thing. I don't care what people say. It is not a good thing to have Durant in Oklahoma City. Even when people look at the ratings and say, they're good in good attendance, they're good in ratings. It doesn't matter. It's a horrible market. That's a terrible market to be proud of good numbers in. You want fantastic numbers in Los Angeles. You don't want fantastic numbers in Oklahoma City. All right, so if Durant goes to the Wizards, that's a big market, right? It's the Eastern Conference. I would love to see the stop of the disparity between the East and West. I would like to see the conferences be a little closer in skill. All right, that was a slight tangent, Brian. We went over Game 2 pretty well. Do you want to go over Game 1, or are there other things you want to talk about this series in general?
I don't need to say too much about Game 1. It was similar to Game 2, but just a slightly different outcome, and not quite as weird.
I want to talk to you about this. You guys luck boxed that overtime, because I just looked it up because of the shot chart. The Warriors went 1 for 5 from the field in overtime, and the Cavaliers went 1 for 9 from the field in overtime. So the only reason and don't forget, Kyrie Irving went down injured in overtime. So basically, only reason the Warriors did not outplay the Cavaliers in overtime, unless you want to maybe say defense. And again, those people saying they're not being defensive, there you go. but the Warriors did not outplay the Cavaliers in overtime in game one. The Warriors were the least sucky team in overtime in game one.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of the overall thought I have for both of these games is that both teams are pretty ugly on offense in both games and pretty good on defense. And it just seems a lot more likely that the Warriors are going to figure it out and put up a good offensive game. A lot more likely them doing it than the Cavaliers.
All right, so I think I got my points in there. I actually said all the stuff I wanted to say about LeBron James. I said the stuff about the shot chart. I don't mind a short show just because, it's you guys are watching the finals, and what I love about this is all of these theories, all of these hypotheses. If the Cavaliers come back and win the next two, this is going to sound silly in a week. If the Warriors blow them out in the next three games, it'll sound silly in a week. So I don't have much else to say. I've been wickedly impressed. I was expecting, again, I put $50 down on the Warriors and was like, this is just going to be a boring over in 4, over in 5 series. Even if it's over in 5, it has not been boring. And the Cavaliers can pick up the mantle from, I guess, the Rockets or whoever else you want to call it, of, the unfortunate injury in playoff time team for now.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I actually want to read, I guess, kind of an op-ed from Patrick. We were going to talk this. I wish I had the ranting skills of Patrick. I love it when he goes off, and I would love to hear the 5-minute version of this rant. But I'm just going to read what he put, in the email when we were going back and forth on the show. Patrick says, it was all Patrick, I would love to talk officiating. The NBA has gotten absurd. The last few minutes of any game become like a WWE match. The refs just call whenever the fuck they want to call rather than according to the actual rule book. And then Patrick puts up the link to that great, thing that we already showed about LeBron James getting hacked like 20 times. There was also the karate chop on James that was a no call, which itself was just after James traveled obscenely, and there was a no call. By the way, that travel, this is me interjecting, that travel on LeBron James on the inbound was ridiculously bad. It was so obvious. Okay, Patrick again, just call the fucking rules, always. If something is a travel, it's a travel with 42 minutes of clock, and it's a travel with 42 seconds on the clock. If there is no hand checking, there's none in the last 2 minutes either. This is how players get hurt. Refs won't call stuff. Players know that. Refs won't call stuff. Players get very rough, and it's a cycle. So that was Patrick's rant. And, I know Patrick he called Dellavedova a dirty player last week on the show and got, some feedback in the comments. And his basic point, and I think, he said this again in the comments, he said on the show, his basic point is the players know how the refs are going to call things. And this is problematic because it puts certain circumstances. One of the examples Patrick gave was when players end up in a scrum when a ball goes to the ground and you got two players tangling, where players know, okay, the refs aren't going to do anything right now. And so I can play dirty. And when that happens, you run the risk of injuring players, and that's not something you want. We want, as I said, we want Kyrie Irving, we want Kevin Love in the game. Kyrie Irving wasn't like injured on anything dirty, but it's just to say health matters a lot in these. Dirty play is not good for the health of the product, and it's bad that the refs in certain scenarios just decide to swallow their whistles and run the risk of players getting injured.
Yeah, I guess I'll just briefly restate what I put on that blog post in my comment, which is basically, people are, I think, arguing semantics to some extent because calling a player dirty is sort of impugning their character that, if they make these moves, they're bad people. So maybe it might make more sense to call them dangerous plays, that whatever their intent is, there should be a basic idea in the NBA that if you do X, Y, or Z is likely to happen, and figure out a better place to draw the line.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Is there anything else you want to say about these series, Brian, before I move on to my little rant and then on to shoutouts?
I mean, even though the offense has been terrible, the games have been really exciting, and boy, it's stressful, and I can't wait to watch the rest of the series.
Yeah, just tell the Warriors to remember they know how to shoot the ball, because they seem to have forgotten this. 50% true shooting, 22.9% from 3 in game 2. This is the best shooting team in the history of the NBA. Come on.
Yeah, so then I'll bring up one last shout out here to Coach Nick. He tweeted, I know it's a radical idea. Run pick and roll to get Curry away from Dellavedova. This didn't happen nearly enough for the Warriors. So yeah, I mean, he's complaining their offense wasn't very good. I think they'll be fine. They'll start to figure it out.
If they're with Steve Kerr, if there's a team that's going to be able to figure out I'm not worried about this. I mean, I don't know how much. That's the other. There are two exciting questions. What are the Warriors going to do to figure this out? And then what do the Cavs have left in the tank? Because this has been like, there have been 3 or 4 times I've just called the Cavs dead. I've been like, Love went down. I was like, okay, it's over. They're not going to compete in the finals. They competed in the first game. Irving went down in the first game, and I said, okay, it's now it's over, right? Okay, it was over before. Now it's really over. Giving a shout out to kind of the video game stuff we're on Twitch. This is like a Final Fantasy boss or Frieza and Dragon Ball, where it's like you kill the last boss, and they're like, I got another form, and you're like, how many times do I have to kill you before you're dead? So that's the Cavaliers right now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. LeBron will never give up. As long as there's red X's, he'll just keep trying to turn them into circles.
And I stand by this. I said this last week. I'll say it this week. LeBron James, he is my contemporary greatest player in the NBA. And, I said this in jest, but I still hold by it if he holds this up. I would have no problem with the Warriors winning the title and LeBron James Jerry Westing this up and getting Finals MVP.
Yeah, he was the best player last night.
No one else close. Like, can you name a player on either team that is anywhere close to LeBron James of deserving MVP right now?
No, it's not Curry and Clay, that's for sure.
So there you go.
Yeah.
All right, so we are done with basketball talk, except for shout-outs. I'm actually going to give a PSA. It's a fun rant I got into this week based on some comments on the blog post the last couple of weeks and a few emails and back and forth. You might feel this is directed at you. It might be. It might not be. I would actually just advise don't overreact to it. Just a general PSA on internet etiquette. So the internet's turned into a great place with a lot of people providing content, many of them for free. Obviously, the Boxscore Geeks falls into this realm. There are two things that have kind of started, have bugged me for a while, but I figured I'd talk about it a little more here. The first one is, you're not my boss. Now, this is kind of rough. There are few people, I answer to Patrick. I'll run ideas by Patrick. I'll make sure he's okay with posts. If I'm going to try and do code updates, I'll make sure he's okay with that, right? But you are not my boss. And I understand the love of the product. I understand liking the content. Here, I understand wanting stuff to get better. As we mentioned, we've had bugs in code that we want to fix, etc. I understand that. But that being said, this is a hobby to me and others, and you're not my boss, which means it's a very awkward situation to put people like myself and other content creators. I notice this with lots of other people that do content, of acting as if you're the person's boss and saying, why isn't this done? Or you need to do this. It's great to be a fan of the product. We appreciate the support. It's great to give feedback when you notice there are problems or issues, but you kind of step over the line, and it's very fine. And it's very hard to notice when you start essentially becoming demanding of the creators and acting as if they are accountable to you. Even in the case of things like Kickstarter or Patreon, basically you have bought a product from them. So beyond the, if you agreed to buy a comic or a book or a pair of sunglasses from the creator, beyond that, even then you're not allowed to tell the person what to do. With a Patreon thing, if they say every time I update a blog post or make a web comic or make a new song, you'll get it and you'll pay me $5, that's the beginning and end of that. So it's really easy. I've definitely actually done this myself, being entitled and calling out people that I love their webcomics or whatever and saying, why isn't this done? Why aren't you doing this? But the reality is, you're not my boss. You're not the boss of anybody else on the internet. And just be a little cognizant of that in your feedback. The second one, this is another kind of rough one, is I'm not your boss. A lot of times myself and Patrick will get, requests for feedback. And then sometimes, hey, what did you think of this piece on this other mainstream blog that rhymes with like ESPN? And on the one hand, it's kind of refreshing to feel that kind of authority. On the other, though, it's a hard position to be in when people ask me to basically be in a position of authority to either critique or lay judgment on stuff. So we enjoy doing this. We do this as a hobby. If we ever monetize, don't worry. I'll definitely make sure that we keep up to snuff on any agreements we make. But the simple thing is the relationship between content creator on the web and, content, consumer can kind of get a little blurred in this new day and age where it's so easy to connect on things like Twitter in the comment section. And just my general advice, my PSA, I'd actually even ask you, don't really comment on this in the comment threads. Like it's cool. Some of you might feel bad and say, I'm sorry if I was doing this. Some of you might not feel bad and feel incredulous. Either or, just leave it alone. Just take that to heart whenever you're reading a blog post, not even just from the Boxscore Geeks, someone else. Just say to yourself really quickly before you're going to comment, before you're going to email, before you're going to tweet, I'm not their boss. They're not my boss. I'm a big fan of theirs, and I'm glad they put their work out there. So that's my general PSA. And Brian, if you wanna be the devil's advocate or whatever, I'm fine with that as well.
No, I mean I mostly agree. Of course, it's I guess the thing I would say is it's good for you to say stuff like this. Maybe there are a few people out there that watch the show that are a little bit younger. Maybe they're like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. I didn't get that. But I'm a little more cynical. I think people are already falling into their camps. You know, the vast majority of our commenters are great and amazing. Maybe a couple of them are jerks.
I do want to shout that out. This, like,
yeah,
we've said this before. I will say this again. When I started blogging at the Wages of Wins, and even on my own blog that I update like once a year now, I actually was getting firmly against comment sections. And if it wasn't for the amazing commenters at the Boxscore Geeks, the comment section would have died a long time ago. And we had that discussion, and I basically went, I'm sorry, but there are so many good commenters. I mean, I called a red card. I'll give a shout out to one commenter, Sean Furian, who I love you, Sean. Just you're going overboard. You wrote a treatise, and basically, oh, by the way, the advice I gave there is, if you have a lot to say on a subject, just go to Facebook, go to your own blog. It's easy to get a WordPress blog, but Facebook's another easy one where you can just write a super long post. Put a link in and just give me an abstract, and I'm happy to shout that out and debate it. Just don't overwhelm the comment section with a ton. But, Sean Furian and Andrew Sutton were arguing about the merits of, signing LeBron James to Adidas and the value of paying $100 million contracts to players to promote tennis shoes. And that kind of comment section, like, that's what I love, right? If the argument turned into what the common internet is, which, very quickly turns to racial slurs and sexism, etc., I would have shut it down long ago. The fact that we've had people arguing about Wilt versus Kareem, the fact that we've had people arguing about LeBron James with Adidas versus Nike, this is the reason the comment section sticks around.
Yeah, and here's kind of the way I look at it. And I'm sort of the outsider, even though I do the show with you guys. I don't write for the site or anything. But so it's kind of the way I look at it is, I think a lot of these commenters, that you guys aren't as big a fan of, are looking to have sort of internet-style debates about these issues. But you and Patrick are more looking for academic-style debates, and those kind of have different rules. I'm not
even academic, because this is going to sound. I'm just going to, like I said, I'm very curmudgeonly to get off my lawn. Even academics, I have my share of problems with academic debates, and I spent a fair amount of time in academia. But no, I mean, basically, we've said this before. It's like, there are, like, for instance, issues people have with the points over par metric. There, I am well open to listen to them. I just like informed debates without arrogance if you don't know the subject that well. And that we get a lot of that in the comment section. I love it. And so that's basically it, and that's what we get, and that's why we keep it around. And as you were saying, yeah, we're not looking for people looking for the classic internet-style debates.
Yeah, so sorry, guys. But no, I mean, I agree. Like, there's so many websites that have internet-style debates that, we're not going to solve anything. So we may as well stick to the academics. But I think kind of the main point that I agree with Patrick's piece on this that he put out, I guess, last week is, doing these shows, we spend an hour or two doing it, and that's it. It's pretty much self-contained. We try to research as much as we can ahead of time, but we don't always do that.
Well, also, by the way, sometimes the research is cheating, right? Because you are watching these finals with bated breath. You were already sending me the shot charts. You, me, and Patrick are already, not even as work, are just being like, oh my God, what happened? Did you see LeBron do this? Did you see that 3 players got 10 rebounds? Like, we do this stuff as just kind of like, around the water cooler discussion anyway.
Yeah, but doing the longer, more statistical blog posts are just tons more work than making these shows, and that's why we've been doing shows, and the blog posts have dropped off. So,
well, I mean, the goal is to do all of them, but yeah, it's a hobby, it's a side thing, and I mean, I find the easiest thing I find is, like, people that produce content, and I include myself in this. As I mentioned, I used to have the exact same issue where I'd yell at people on the web. I'd yell at web cartoonists that I really liked and be like, where's that podcast you said was coming out? Where is this comic? You said you were going to make this comic and I haven't seen it or whatever. And when you become a creator, you kind of realize both how much work goes into creating any content, and then additionally, how easy it is to get ambitious on a project and then just realize you're not in it. Now, I've written on both sides of this, where it's like, when you start getting into things like Patreon or Kickstarter, it's like, well, you better be ready. Like, you better be ready to tell your fans and listeners and users what's going on, and if things go wrong, keep them in the loop and be ready for contingencies. That's something different. But I'm just saying, it's really easy to get overly ambitious and not realize, like, this is an excuse, but, I got a double ear infection 2 weeks ago, and I found out an amazing thing, which is a double ear infection knocks you on your ass for the entire week. I I got so little done that week. I wanted to do so much more than I got done that week, and it's, it happens. Life gets in the way sometimes. We spent way too long on this topic, Brian. Let us get to shout-outs.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess here's the last thing I could say on it. If we do want to help out Dre, maybe we could communicate better, like kind of what our agenda is coming up. Like, we're going to try to do this many shows in this amount of time, keep people in the loop. I don't know. We'll see.
That's not bad. Maybe when we get a little more grounded, we'll actually try and do like this week. Here's what you can expect of the Box Score.
And yeah, and the reason I bring that up is another point from Patrick's piece was basically, well, when we shine writing-wise, and again, I say we, you're not going to see anything from me writing, I can't write at all, but from him and you anyway, is that the off-season is a lot more prime time for our types of articles, right? Player movement, player evaluation. Actually, just watching the games during the playoffs is not our strength. So, yeah, I guess look for more off-season stuff, probably.
Fair enough. Way to be nice. Okay, let's head to shout-outs. You got anybody this week? I didn't ask you pre-show, so I'm putting you on the spot.
No, just I've been loving everything on social media about the finals. Lots of great comments and articles coming out. So, yeah, a lot of great stuff on the NBA right now.
All right, I got two boring ones. They're not actually... Well, actually, okay, so first one, I already said this, but let's make it official. Andrew Sutton, Sean Furian, for your argument on shoes. On shoes. It was from a shout-out. It wasn't even a topic. You guys argued about shoes so much in the comments. I love you guys. I wish I'd had more time. I would have liked to have actually turned that into a piece, and maybe I will in the off-season. But Andrew Sutton, Sean Furian, for your argument on shoes in the comment section, you actually get a shout-out from me. Just keep the comments a little more concise, Sean, and you already said you were going to do that, so thanks, Sean. You're on top of it. Okay. And shout-out number one. Shout-out number two, I actually got to see Mad Max last week with my wife. Loved it. Everybody else loved it. I'm always like 10 steps behind where the popular stuff is, but I enjoyed it, so... Mad Max, Fury Road, I think is what it was called. Amazing movie. My suggestion for an alternative title was Mad Max Road Trip, but, whatever floats your boat. Final shout out. This was actually from pre-show because I was doing some research into all of these rebounds. And you actually asked this last week, Brian, about how the Houston Rockets, because when I wrote about the most lopsided finals, the Houston Rockets made it to the finals, like the only team in NBA history to do it with a losing record. And you asked about it, and basically the answer is pretty simple. Moses Malone was a ridiculously good player. My shout-out goes to Moses Malone because if you look over this guy's history, he was involved in so many trades, a player for just draft picks. For as great as he was the first, maybe not the first, I don't know if he was the first player, but he got 3 MVPs. So Moses Malone was an amazing player, and I just don't understand how many times he was traded for nothing, essentially, in his career, especially during his prime.
One follow-up question to that, you may or may not know this. So was he traded to the Rockets in the middle of the 1981 season, or was he hurt earlier?
It was preseason.
Okay.
So he didn't do middle season, but yeah, he got traded a few times, and it was ridiculous. So actually, you could also call Moses Malone the curse of the Portland Trailblazers, actually, because they managed to get him from the dispersal draft from the ABA. That's how he ended up in the NBA. And they traded him before they drafted him, which is amazing, right? This should have been a huge thing for them. And then they traded him away for a future first-round pick. And so, basically what I would say is, all of their bad luck with big sense, even Bill Walton, Bill Walton got him a title. Bill Walton probably should have gotten him 2 or 3. Bill Walton, Sam Bowie, Greg Oden, maybe it's the curse of Moses Malone. They traded away Moses Malone, and that's why they can never have luck with a healthy big. Doesn't count, by the way, listeners.
No, that's all I was going to add in is, all 3 of those guys were devastated by injuries.
So there you go.
For those who didn't know.
All right. Anything else, Brian?
No, that's it. Let's hit the road.
All right, so if you happen to find this show not through the website, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. We are also on iTunes and Stitcher. Please subscribe, upvote, all that fun jazz. It helps us out. We are the Boxscore Geeks Show on iTunes, the Boxscore Geeks Show on Stitcher. We live stream this show every week. We are in love with it now. Twitch.tv is amazing, so you can find us at twitch.tv/nerdnumbers. And then when we're done, if you miss it live, we put the video show up on YouTube, so you can find that at the YouTube station Nerd Numbers. I have a playlist for all the Boxscore Geeks Show. You can find myself on Twitter as @NerdNumbers, and you can find our producer, Brian Foster, as @BoxscoreBrian. Patrick is normally on the show as well. You can find him as @NBA Geek. Feel free to leave us comments, tweet at us, and maybe it ends up on the show. With that, we'll see you next week.